Herzlich willkommen zu unserem Webinar zu Microsoft Teams von Cycle. Wir werden heute das Webinar zum Thema Tools für das effiziente Management von Microsoft Teams haben. Mein Name ist Urs Wemmerling, ich bin Leiter des Marketings hier bei Cycle. Begleitet werde ich heute von Michele Casazza. Er wird uns durch den größten Teil des Webinars leiten und den größten Teil bestreiten. Bevor wir starten, zwei, drei Housekeeping-Sachen. Das erste, typischerweise, wir werden dieses Webinar aufzeichnen, damit Sie das auch später nochmal Kollegen, Kolleginnen auch weiterreichen können, aber auch für späteres Anschauen. Alle Teilnehmer sind in diesem Webinar auf stumm geschaltet. Bitte benutzen Sie das Q&A-Feature hier in Teams, um Ihre Fragen zu stellen. Ich werde mich dann während dem Vortrag von Michele bemühen, alle Fragen so gut wie es geht zu beantworten oder dann hängige Fragen dann auch nach dem Webinar in schriftlicher Form. Wir verwenden, wie gesagt, Microsoft Teams Live-Event für dieses Webinar. Das ermöglicht uns auch gleichzeitig, dass Sie ein bestimmtes Features, das selten bekannt ist, in Teams aktivieren können. Unten sehen Sie hier auf dem Slide, Sie können die Captions oder Untertitel einschalten, hier in Ihrem Teams-Fenster, können dann auch entsprechend in den Settings die Sprache ändern, sodass Sie dann zum Beispiel den Vortrag von Michele später, der in Englisch halten wird, auch sich in Englisch mit englischen Untertiteln oder auch in deutschen Untertiteln anzeigen können, ganz wie Sie möchten. Ja, genau. Noch zwei, drei Worte vorneweg zu Cycle. Cycle ist eine Tochterunternehmung von Lifetiles. Lifetiles seit letztem Dezember. Lifetiles ist eine weltweit tätige Firma mit Fokus auf Digital Workplace Technologien. Wir sind weltweit, vor allem in Australien, USA und hier in Europa, in Dänemark, Schweiz und in England vertreten, sind Microsoft-Partner, mehrfach ausgezeichnet. Also wir haben auch, verfügen doch durchaus über Kompetenz, wenn es um Microsoft 365, Office 365 und Teams geht. Ja, jetzt gleich zum Thema Teams. Sie alle, wahrscheinlich gleich wie wir, haben auch in den letzten Monaten während dem Covid-19-Ausbruch mitverfolgt, wie der Run zu Remote Work, Webinars, zu Team-Meetings, die online stattfanden, Schulunterricht, der online stattfand, alles eigentlich natürlich ein Effekt des nicht nur Teams, aber auch Teams in der Benutzung nach oben schnellen hat lassen. Hier eine Grafik von Microsoft bis Ende März, der relativ schön zeigt, wie die Teams-Benutzung hier in Europa bis Ende März korreliert ist mit den Lockdowns. Und man muss auch gestehen, Microsoft hat das über alles ziemlich gut gemeistert. Man muss sich vorstellen, die Benutzung hat sich innerhalb von Wochen verdreifacht von diesem Cloud-Service. Ein Workload, der eigentlich auch wirklich nur durch einen Cloud-Service, der weltweit verteilte Ressourcen oder auf Europa verteilte Ressourcen verwenden kann, gemeistert werden kann. Weil das aber relativ schnell gegangen ist, haben wir auch festgestellt bei einigen unserer Kunden, aber auch generell von Microsoft, das Feedback war dasselbe, dass auch einige typische Fehler sich eingeschlichen haben. Vor allem auch dass man sich nicht die Zeit gelassen konnte, ein sehr sauberes Einführungsprojekt von Microsoft Teams durchzuführen, sondern eher technische Zurverfügungstellung, also IT-projektmäßig das eigentlich angepackt hat, oder dass man an Teams gedacht hat als Video- oder Chat-Software und weniger, dass dahinter sehr viel SharePoint und Exchange passiert. Oder natürlich auch dann, dass man dann plötzlich mit den Fragen konfrontiert war, ja, wer darf dann was? Ja? Was man auch häufig unter dem Thema Governance anschaut. Wir haben zu diesen Themen auch verschiedene Blogserien aufgeschalten, die auf diese typischen Fehler eingehen und auch sagen, wie man sie vermeiden kann, was man anstelle machen kann. Oder auch dann positiv formuliert ein E-Book geschrieben, wenn es umgeht, wie man Teams erfolgreich in der Praxis auch wirklich einführt. Dahinter liegt ein Vorgehen, das Cycle entwickelt hat, das wir jetzt schon 2-3 Jahre lang verwenden, wenn es um Collaboration Spaces wie Teams eben geht, weil es eben nicht nur um die Technologie geht, sondern so vor allem auch sehr stark am Anfang um das, was wir nennen Envisioning, wie man selber arbeitet, wie man selber arbeiten will, was wirklich für jeden ein Team ist, welche Teams es gibt, was diese Teams können müssen, welche Use Cases es gibt, bevor es dann wirklich zur Implementation geht, zur Implementation von Teams, zur technischen Implementation, auch wie man Teams dann wirklich secure oder sicher betreibt, auch wenn man sehr schnell sehr viel Remote-User zufügen muss und schlussendlich auch, wenn es um die User Adoption geht. Wir haben hierzu ein doch sehr bewährtes Vorgehen, eigentlich auch, das auch sehr spielerisch, auch etwas mit Design Thinking unterstützt, vorgeht. Gut, soweit eigentlich von meiner Seite zur Einführung, und jetzt möchte ich eigentlich ganz gerne an Michele übergeben, der uns durch das eigentliche Thema von heutigen Webinar durchführt, nämlich von einige Tools und einige Möglichkeiten in Teams selber anschaut, wie denn Teams oder Microsoft Teams als Tool, als Umgebung effizient gemanagt werden kann. Michele?
Thank you, Urs, and thank you everyone for being part of this webinar. I want to show you what we are going to cover in the next 30 minutes approximately. So we will be talking about managing files, so how we can really be more efficient when we work in teams, and specifically with the content that we are working with. Then we will see a section where we can see how we can secure our team, both from an administrative perspective and also from a team owner perspective. We will also look at some of the roles and permissions, so who can do what within Teams. And then we will look at the apps that are available, but not just the apps themselves, but how we can really unify and how Teams becomes the really central, new central digital workplace for many other business apps. And as last, we will see some features that are might be really useful depending on your use case in your team or in your organization. Okay, so let's start with the first part, which is managing files. So we will see here mostly the syncing functionality of Teams, but we'll also look a little bit, not too much, what's happening behind the scenes, because Teams uses other services, and we will also try to avoid having a really complex structure, or at least something that is useful for the users and the members of a team. And for this functionality, we'll talk about OneDrive Sync, which is one of the very important core of working with files. So Teams leverages other Microsoft 365 services, for example, SharePoint and OneDrive. As an end user, you don't need really to know that this is the case, because this is quite happening transparent for users. But if you do, you might have that extra advantage or extra edge to really be really proficient and more efficient by using Teams. So a couple of concepts here. So when you exchange a file within a chat, this file will be stored in your OneDrive. And again, you don't need to know the details, but I will mention something later that might be useful. As opposed to when you share a file in a channel in Team, this file will be stored in SharePoint. Yeah. And what I'm going to show now is really the sync functionality that we can leverage for syncing files and also notebooks using OneDrive. So I'm going to switch to my browser here. And so if you have used Teams in the past, you are probably aware that you have two tabs here that are by default. One is called Post and the other one is called Files. And this is where you find all your files within the team, or in this case, within the channel. And so, like I mentioned before, all these files are actually stored in the background in SharePoint. In fact, here you have an option to open them with SharePoint. The reason I'm showing this is just to show you the sync functionality of OneDrive. So OneDrive is something that is integrated in Windows 10. So if you're running Windows 10, that already runs as a client. And I'm going to bring up my other window here, which is at this point in time, I have already synced 2 teams in my OneDrive, and I'm going to sync also this one at the moment. So I'm going to hit the sync button here, which will open OneDrive, and it will start syncing the files. There you go. So you can see it will sync the files for that specific team. So in here now I can go and see the files that I have. So what is the benefit of this? A couple. The first thing is that you can work in your files, your Teams file directly in your Windows Explorer, so in your desktop. If you make a change on a file here on your desktop, the file will be synced with Teams in the cloud, and vice versa. So it's really a seamless experience of working within Windows Explorer, within your Teams client, or within your browser, or even within your mobile Teams app. But even better, one of the other advantage of working with OneDrive Sync is that you can work on your files offline. So if you don't have connectivity for some reason, or you're on an airplane, maybe not at this time, you will be able to work on your files offline. And once you go back online, your changes will be synced and they will be updated again with the cloud version. So that's a very handy feature. Especially also if you want to, if you're working with a couple of teams, you might be a member of many teams, but if you are really working on a few teams only, you can decide to sync those ones. Now, similarly, I'm going back to the channel here. You can add OneNote notebooks in your channel. If you haven't done it already, I encourage you to do so. You can add it here with a plus sign, and then it becomes a tabs. So in this case, I have a OneNote notebook here linked as a tab, and you have different sections for the notebook, and it opens now in read-only in Teams, but you have an option here to then open in the app, and if you do that, it will automatically sync the OneNote notebook with your OneNote desktop app, and again, the changes that you make on the desktop app will be synced with the Teams version, the cloud version of Teams. Now, a couple more things that I want to mention about files. I mentioned in the beginning about the structure. So, if you have worked in the past with SharePoint, you might have seen a shift from folders to metadata, and now we're kind of back at the origin of folders, because Teams uses folders as well. Every time you create a new channel, a folder is created for you where the files are stored. The point that I want to make here is that if you are expecting many files in your team, there is a risk that these files will just end up in the top level, and you end up with hundreds of files without a structure, because when you upload a file in a conversation, as I'll show you in a moment, they will just be saved in at the same level. And so I highly recommend you, if you are if you know that the teams that you are working on, maybe it's a project, will receive a lot of files, I encourage you to create folders like I've done here, and then you can save files already in your folder. Especially like I have shown here, you can see these folders also in your Windows Explorer, so you can upload files directly here, or if you have already files, you can also move them to a specific folder that has been created, or if you want to create it at a later stage. And the last point that I want to show you about working with files in Teams is that you have the ability to really have a conversation on a file. So in this case, once you upload a file within a Teams conversation, so in a channel, you can see that a conversation can really happen, and it's basically a conversation that happens on the file itself, and it will be saved or stored as a thread message in the file. So here I'm bringing up the conversation. So you can have discussions about what's happening in the file. So someone asks them to review it, and someone can give their feedback, and these will be all captured within the threaded conversation. This is different than the comments that you have in Word, which you're probably used to. So that's still available. It's just a separate functionality. So if I'm going to close this now, you will notice that within this conversation, this is a conversation, it's a threaded conversation, which is only about the file. Yeah. So I can post something else here, and it will be captured within this thread. Okay, I'm switching back to the slides now, and we are going to talk about the next topic, which is securing your team. Both from an admin perspective, but also from a owner perspective. So we all like the flexibility of Teams, but we also want to make sure that we are not hindering the security. So what can we do and what measure can we take to make sure our informations are safe? We will see that I will show you on a more at the top-down approach. We will first understand what an external user is, and then we will go through the different levels where you can control the security and privacy of Teams. So in Teams, you have 3 types of external users. If you have used Teams before, you're probably familiar with guests. These are users that have been invited, that you probably have invited in your organization, so you have added them to a team. So they're also called authenticated user because you have sent them an invite, they've been verified, and now they can access the resources in your team. Anonymous users are a very particular type of external user that can join meetings without registering. So you can have anonymous joining meeting, and this has to be enabled in the organization because it's not enabled by default. So it can be very useful, but obviously there are also some privacy considerations to take into account. And lastly, you have federated users. Federated is a little bit of an old school term. Now they are more called Azure business to business, but in essence, these are users, external users in other organizations that they are also using Teams or Skype for business. So you don't have, let's say, anything to do with them, but you can technically chat or communicate with these users without having to, have created a trust or an old school federation that was done in the past. So you can just search for their email address, and if they are using Teams, you can just chat away with them. We'll see that there is something to keep in mind on this option, and I'm going to mention it in this next slide. So this is a simplified table of what the different type of users can do. So guests can do pretty much everything in channels, in meeting, or in chat. Going to bring up the pointer here. Then federated and anonymous user cannot join a channel. So if you external user that join a channel can only be guests. And then you can have a meeting with federated user, and you can have a chat. I put asterisks here because you can do chat, call, or video with these federated users. You cannot do file sharing. And this needs to be enabled for both organizations. It's actually enabled by default. And we will see in the next slide that there are some options to restrict this type of access. And lastly, anonymous users, all they can do, they can join meetings only if that option is enabled in the organization. And it's really important to keep in mind that this is an all or nothing option. So either you have anonymous user in meetings or you don't. If you're interested in more details about all the meeting settings and functionalities, we have done a webinar for that 2 weeks ago, so you can watch the recording. And we will also be releasing soon a blog post on this topic. Now, the highest level where you can set up security in Teams, it's at the domain level. So first here you see that option that I mentioned before, which is on by default. So it means that you are allowed to communicate with people in other organizations that are using Skype for Business or Teams. But additionally, you can set a so-called whitelist or blacklist for domains. So if you create a whitelist, you can specify only the domains that you want your organization to communicate with. So you can say, I only allowed company XYZ to communicate via Teams with my organization. Or you can create a blacklist where you say, I allow all domains except for those that I specify here. So in this case, this would be a blacklist. I only exclude these 2 domains. Now, the next level where you can control your security as a meeting organizer is the lobby. So the lobby is something that you have control of as a meeting organizer, and you can decide who can bypass it. It means that before people can join your meeting, they need to be admitted by yourself, so by the organizer. And in this case, you can choose if people in your organization can join automatically, so they can bypass the lobby, or you can decide if you are the only one that can bypass the lobby, and you can then add users as they come. Now, the next level down, it's at the team level. So if you haven't used Teams before, every time you create a new team, you will have to choose the privacy of that team. If you choose public, it means that everyone in the organization can join the team. If you choose private, people that want to join will need to be accepted by the owner of the team. Now, it's important to know that private teams are discoverable by default. It means that everybody can see them. They just cannot join, but they can see that they are in existence. So might be something to keep in mind if you are concerned about privacy, and we'll see that there is a setting to change that. Additionally, for private teams, you can also, as an admin, create some rules. In this case, they are called sensitivity labels, but as an example, you can say, if a team is private, external users or guests will not be allowed in this team. So the private team should only be used within the organization. So this is an example where you can really leverage these extra security that is called sensitivity labels. Then if we go one level down from the team, we can see that we can apply an extra level of privacy to a channel within a team. So a channel can be created as private. It means that only specific members of the team can access that channel. And so there is a policy where an administrator can configure if private teams are discoverable and who can create private channels. So you could, because Teams policy work in a flexible way, you can create a policy that you can assign to specific users only. So you can say only these users or group for users can create private channel, and then you can say that the discovery of private teams is off for all users. And lastly, the next level of security of privacy, it's on the file level. We often get the question of how can I share a file with guests or with external users that are not in a team? I don't want to duplicate my file because then I have to maintain 2 copies. And so how can I do it? Now, the reason I brought up that files are stored in SharePoint is because if you notice, you actually have more control on the files themselves. So I mentioned before that the files are stored in the SharePoint library. This means that if you go on a file, if you open a file in SharePoint, you can actually control the permission of the file. Now, Teams is smart enough to really assign the permission as they are required to the file itself. And again, you don't need to know this behind the scenes, but additionally, you can select a file and you can set additional permission. This is why it's important to understand how the sharing functionality works in Microsoft 365. And this is a really new sharing experience that is being rolled out across all the services. But in summary, you can here specify an additional person, and it can be also an external user that you want to have access to this file. And that's exactly how you grant that additional permission, and you give a specific permission for this file to other people. If you are interested, and I encourage you to really learn about the sharing experience in 365, not just as an admin, but also as an end user. And I believe that this is important also from a change management and adoption point of view, because it's something that all users need to be aware. And if we want our information to really be managed securely, users need to be aware of the sharing functionality in 365. In fact, this new experience is being rolled out at the moment, also in Teams. It means that when you paste a link for a file in a Teams channel, you will get this same user experience or sharing experience where you can choose who you want to share this file with. We also have a three-part blog post on this very topic on our website. So if you're interested, please have a read there. And there's also a section which is specifically for Teams. Next up, we will look at some of the roles and permissions. So who can do what in the Teams, and also a couple of features that you might find useful, which is called dynamic membership. Now, there are three roles mainly in Teams. One is the owner. As you can imagine, owners can do anything. Members can do almost anything except for adding or removing other members or edit and delete teams. And guests can also participate in channel, in private chat. Something to be aware of is that they cannot share a file in a chat, and the reason is because they don't have a OneDrive storage in the invited organization. But again, they cannot create a team, and so they have limited functionalities as you would expect. As a team owner, additionally, you can set different permissions for both members and for the guests. So the guests need to be allowed at the tenant level, so the administrator need to allow guests in Teams. But then additionally, as a team owner, you can set additional permission, for example, to create, update, or delete channels. Now, the dynamic membership features it's quite interesting, because you can have a team where you can decide if the membership can be managed dynamically based on an attribute. And this attribute can be a department, a job title, or any other custom attribute in your organization. So let's say that you have a department of finance, or you have a department of the management. So you have a team for finance, and every time a new person joins the teams, they will automatically be added to that team. And if they move department, or they leave the company, they will automatically be removed. And the same for for the management. So you can really think of a few use cases where this can be really an interesting feature. Especially because you can have other custom attributes in your organization that you can leverage for this functionality. Now, so if you're a user, maybe you can bring this up with with your admin, that you are aware of this functionality. If you are an admin, this is being configured through Office 365 groups, or now they're called Microsoft 365 groups within the Azure portal. So bring this up if you really can find a use case in your organization for dynamic membership. And the last part, again, as an owner of a team, you can set something called channel moderation. It means that only moderators can post within a channel, and the moderators doesn't have to be necessarily an owner. You can decide, or you can configure who a moderator is. So all moderators will be able to post. Other members will not be able to post, but then you can decide if members will be allowed to reply to those posts. So you can maybe use this as an announcement channel, or you can see other use cases for this type of moderation. So it's a per channel setting, so it can be configured for every channel, just not in the general channel. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about unifying your apps, and why I think this is really important, because we all know that we have to switch between different apps every day, being your finance app, leave app, timesheets, or productivity app. So it kind of became common thing. But now we are really seeing a real shift with Teams really becoming your go-to platform to aggregate a number of informations from different applications, and we'll see how powerful this can be. So in Teams, you can have a different type of apps. We have the Microsoft 365 apps, we have third-party apps, then you can have custom apps developed in your organization, then you can also create or or let's say link an app by yourself. And in the end, we will also see how we can bring your intranet into Teams and why that is important. So I'm going to switch just quickly again to Teams, just to show you where the apps are. I'm just going to quickly refresh this. So apps are available to all users. At least every user can browse apps, and most of the apps can also be pinned on the left-hand side of the Teams, on the left bar. And from there, you can really also search for additional apps. So first you have your Microsoft apps, which are your Planner, your OneNote, or even your Wiki, which are made available by default, and every user can pin them. And it was just a refresh. And then you can see that you have hundreds. We are actually almost reaching the thousands of the apps on how other third party are providing an integration, either through a connector, which is just surfacing information, or through an actual app where you can really interact with the data and update those data back in the source. So this is where you can really add multiple apps into your Teams. Then you have custom apps, which I mentioned before, you can develop in your organization. And if you don't have, an app for that is already being created for that, you can add it manually in something called website, which is nothing else than a link. But it's so flexible because you can create a link to pretty much anything, from a single file up to an external app that lives somewhere else. You just have to paste in the URL in here, and I believe I have created here a link to a Microsoft Teams site, as you can see, or this is another tab, a website tab, which is pretty much showing a PDF. So, and this PDF again can live within your Teams, can live in SharePoint, or can live even outside your Teams. Now, the last part that I want to bring up is really the shift that we are seeing in how we consume the information. So Teams is really great for collaboration and for bringing people together, work in a quick and an efficient way. But on the other hand, it can also create information silos if you want, especially if you look at it from a point of corporate comms. So you might have different news and information spread across different teams and channels. And so that becomes also difficult to maybe run automated processes or workflows because of this scattered information. So Teams is not really designed to support a broader company communication with that top-down information flow. And this is why we have developed our own internal app, which is called Reach, which really is a lightweight cloud corporate communication tool, which is optimized for mobile consumption of comms for your staff, for your employees. And it doesn't mean that the intranet is dead. So the intranet is still exists. It's just that long gone are the days of when you actually start your day by opening your intranet website. Now the focus point and we will spend most of the time in Teams, and that's why we are really bringing the content of intranet, which can live somewhere in a different system, into Teams integrated, and we can consume it directly here. So you can see that we are we can see all the news that we are surfacing from our intranet here. This is a demo site. Then you have your pages where you can find your manuals, your policies and procedure, your guides. And then you can have your events that are published on your intranet, where you can, look at the event. You can register to your event, and additionally, from an editor point of view, you can also create news within Teams, within this app. So you can really create all the settings. Now we also have the functionality to put something as an alert, given that we are in a time where we're really news are coming up real quick, and we need to have a quick visibility. And on top of this is also mobile friendly. It's really already optimized for mobile usage, because if you're using Teams, you're also probably using the Teams app, which is really invaluable. So if you're interested in Reach, please reach out to us. No pun intended, but get in touch with Urs or myself, and we can organize a demo for this. The last part that I want to touch then about apps, it's more on the administrative side, and I'm going to show you this in the admin center. So as part of the administrative task, you can manage which apps can be made available in the organization. So you'll see that there are over 600 apps now available. You can decide if this will be allowed in the organization or not. But you can even go one level farther by defining permission policies, where you can say, where you can differentiate between different types of apps and which apps are available to each user. So you can say that you allow all the Microsoft apps, but you only want to allow specific third-party apps, maybe 5, 10, or whatever the apps have been organized and allowed in your organization. And you can decide if you want to block custom apps. And because of the flexibility of Teams policy, you can assign these apps to different sets of users. And lastly, you can also automatically pin apps for specific users. So I mentioned before that in this left-hand bar, you can pin or unpin app. In this case, I have pin planner. In this case, I have created, in fact, a policy that automatically pins this app for specific users. So as you can see, there is also quite some flexibility here in managing apps in your organization. The last topic, it's about those features that not everybody might be aware of, because Teams gets really a lot of features released very regularly. So I hope that you can find some of these useful, and you might find use cases within your team or your organization. So let's go through those features in the next couple of minutes. The first one is about audio recording, and this comes really you're probably familiar with the WhatsApp experience, which has been common now in the last few years, when you can record voice messages in your app, and the same functionality is now available in Teams. In the Teams mobile app, you can record a message on the go, and you can just send it, and that's really the what you can do. You just have to type. You don't have to call. This becomes more the on-the-go mobile functionality. Another feature is called urgent messages. This is not enabled by default, but if you do have it enabled, when you message a person in a chat, because it doesn't apply to channels, this person will get notified repeatedly every 2 minutes for 20 minutes or until they read the message. Again, it has to be turned on by an admin, and that's where you do it in the admin center. And you might find the use case for this if you work in an industry where you really require people attention, and they really have to be notified quickly. And if you are, for example, presenting something in Teams, your status is set to not disturb, and you probably see this message that it says you'll only get notification for urgent messages and from your priority contacts. And this is exactly what it is, urgent messages. And once again, due to the flexibility of Teams policy, you can decide if only some users will be allowed to send urgent messages. And next up is the message status and the delegation. So the message status, if you have come from Skype for Business, is something that was there already, and it's something that you can write where people see whenever they want to chat to you. And I'm going to quickly show where this is. Over here, you just have to go on your your profile picture, and then you can set your message status in here, and you can decide if you want to show it when people message you. which is exactly looking like this. Now, the additional feature, it's a delegation. It's not a function per se, but it means that you can actually mention someone in your status message, and this means that when someone tries to message you, they will see your delegates, and they can hover on the delegate name, and they can contact them directly, without sending you an email and see that you are offline and receiving the out of office. So it's just a handy way to let someone know that you are not there and you want to delegate to someone else. Okay, the other feature that has been rolled out only in the last few months is tags, which is, I hope you can find very useful. And it's basically the ability to group a few people in the team in a tags, and then you can mention them together. And you can do this based on their function or on their role in a team. So let's see how this works real quick. I have a team here where I already set up a couple of tags. So I'm going to managing the teams where I can see all the members. And here you can see that I have signed a guest tag to the people that are guests. So these 4 people are guests. And then I also assign a developer tag. Maybe you have developers in the team, and then you have project managers. So you can really decide what tag to use, if it's based on the function, if it's based on the role that that person plays in the team. But the real cool feature is that you can now go into a conversation or a discussion and you can mention that tag. So in this case here, I'm mentioning the guest. You see that I have 4 people, and it's a way to really communicate only to a subset of people, and I don't have to inform the whole team. And the good thing is that you don't need to know the name of these people. You just use the tag, and if someone else joined as a guest, they will have to be tagged as a guest as well. But then you can mention them in one go without having to know their name or communicate with them directly. So the text functionality needs to be enabled by an administrator. That's where you can set if team owners can apply tags, and also members can add additional tags. And as a team owner yourself, you can also decide if members can add additional tags. And lastly, this is also a functionality that's being rolled out, and it's the ability to share an email from Outlook to a Teams channel directly. So at the moment you can still do it, but you have to grab the channel email address, and then you have to copy it and paste it in your email. So there's a couple of steps involved, but this is going to be a really straightforward experience for users where they just type in the channel name, and then they will get a list of channels and teams, and that's where they can actually share the email within the Teams channel. So email is not going to be away. There is still a usage for emails sometimes, but there is certainly a massive shift now of using less and less email and having more conversation in Teams. And that's why saving an email in Teams will also allow you to keep the context of all the information that happens in that channel within the channel, which is also happening when you do Teams channels, which we have covered in the previous webinar. Okay, so that's the end of my part. This is the topics that we have covered, and here I have a couple of takeaways for you. So the syncing functionalities that we have talked about. Keep in mind that anonymous users in meetings, but then really, if you can, I really recommend to learn about the sharing options in 365, and I've mentioned the blog parts that we have on our website. So with this, I will hand it back to Urs. Thank you very much for being part of this webinar. I hope you got something really useful out of it, and I hope to see you in the next webinar.
Thanks, Michele, and thanks a lot as well for the not that many, but still questions we got on the Q&A. There's maybe one question to you, Michele, a bit summarizing what the feedback was. Is you mentioned quite a few times your admin can decide to turn it on or off. How would a company or actually an admin know which features they should turn on in a structured way? How would you go after that? challenge?
Yeah, that is a very good question, and it's something that we actually cover every time we do a workshop with our customers, and it's basically part of the governance. So, we present all the features that Teams has, but then it's not really the admin that needs to decide if that feature needs to be turned on or off. It's really part of a workshop where you decide, okay, as an organization, we have these requirements, and then we can say, okay, team. This is what Teams allows you to do. So you can have a full flexibility and you can be completely open, or you can be, more on the closed spectrum. And that's where in this workshop, you really understand what the policies are, what the needs are. And then we can say, okay, in your case, we recommend that you implement these features, but you turn off these other ones. And that's where then the admin can implement these changes.
Thank you, Michele. So, dann wechsle ich zurück auf Deutsch und möchte nochmal highlighten, dass vor allem auch dieser Teil davor, herauszufinden, welche Use Cases in Ihrem Unternehmen wichtig sind, ist einer der Teile, die wir gerne auch in Teams-Projekten und Teams-Engagement für Kunden tun. Auf dem nächsten Slide sehen wir aber auch, wir machen noch einiges mehr. Neben dem Planungsteil, der auch durchaus mal mit einem Game, mit dem Teams Game oder dem Teams Planner interaktiv mit den einzelnen Usergruppen passieren kann. Das machen wir heute auch online, haben wir auch einiges dazu gelernt. Offerieren wir auch Academy, das sind Inhalte mit Trainingsinhalten und Blogbeiträgen oder Webinaren, wie wir jetzt eines hier zum Beispiel hatten. Viele Kunden wollen mit uns oder sprechen mit uns auch über, wie bringe ich meine Business-Apps oder mein Intranet dann wirklich in Teams hinein. Michele hat einiges schon erwähnt zum Thema Apps. Wir können oder wir bauen auch durchaus für Kunden Custom Apps, die ihre Unternehmensapplikationen in Teams hineinbringen und haben auch natürlich auch eigene. Eine davon hat der Michele gezeigt, das ist Lifetime Reach für Unternehmenskommunikation. Und last but not least das ganze Thema von Adoption, von Benutzerakzeptanz auch mit Messen von wer tut was, wie oft wird wirklich welche Sharing-Funktion genutzt, wer treibt sich wo rum und wie viele externe User haben wir in welchen Bereichen, müssen wir mehr Governance und mehr Restriktionen einführen. Ist durchaus auch ein dynamischer Prozess, deswegen ist ein Tracking und eine Analyse von den User-Daten sehr wichtig und natürlich auch den ganzen Teil von Benutzerschulungen. Im Unterschied zu den bekannten Benutzerschulungskonzepten vielleicht vor 10 Jahren, Benutzerschulungen passieren heute eigentlich direkt im Produkt, direkt im Use Case selber. Das heißt, wir bauen diese Benutzerführungen oder Benutzerschulungen direkt in Teams ein, dort, wo der Benutzer sich wirklich dann auch fragt, wie mache ich das? Wen muss ich jetzt fragen? Welche App soll ich installieren? Dort muss er auch seine Hilfe bekommen. Sehr viele dieser Informationen haben wir, Michele hat es auch erwähnt, in unseren Webinaren verpackt. Das letzte davon zum Thema Teams Meetings. Michele hat es erwähnt. Das ist das letzte vor 2 Wochen. Daneben haben wir noch schon eine ganze Reihe von Webinaren zum ganzen Thema wie Teams Einführung. Wie kann ich das in wenigen Wochen tun? Wie setze ich Governance für Teams auf? Alles eher ein bisschen auf die, soll ich sagen, Rollen von Administratoren von Teams, gerichtet. Weniger jetzt direkt die kleinen Nitty-Gritty-Details für Benutzertipps. Haben wir auch auf unserer Webseite, aber die Webinare richten sich vornehmlich auch auf die Administratoren. Ich ermuntere Sie hier auf unserer Webseite vielleicht das eine oder andere sich nochmal on demand anzusehen. Den Link finden Sie sich auf diesem Slide. So, damit wären wir am Ende von unserem Webinar. Ich danke Michele recht herzlich. Ich habe hier nochmal 4 Adressen von 4 von unseren Teams-Spezialisten, die über den ganzen Bereich von eher technischen, admin-orientierten Tasks zu Cloud-basierten oder Backend-basierten Tasks zu Senior, auch zu Adoption-Tasks oder Trainings. Wir können eigentlich mittlerweile mit diesen 4, aber wir haben noch einen anderen Benutzer dahinter noch, die ganzen Bereich von Teams-spezifischen Fragen abdecken. Ja, herzlichen Dank für die Teilnahme an diesem Webinar. Wir werden in den nächsten 48 Stunden Ihnen einen Link zum Recording und auch zu den Slides zusenden und hoffe, Sie konnten einiges profitieren und wünsche Ihnen noch einen schönen Dienstagabend. Dankeschön.